Conquest of the Planet of the Apes takes place somewhere in North America in the year 1991. Set 18 years after the events of Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and 1,987 years before the events of The Planet of the Apes, the movie takes place entirely in a bleak dystopian city where apes have become domestic slaves. After the death of his friend Armando, and after seeing how badly apes are treated, talking ape Caesar leads a revolt that will see the birth of the Planet of the Apes.
Lousy human bastards!
Cliffy here from Cliff Dive into Movies, and let's talk about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Released on June 14, 1972, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is the fourth movie in the original Planet of the Apes saga. The director was J. Lee Thompson. He was originally intended to be the director of the very first Planet of the Apes movie, but because of scheduling conflicts, he wasn't able to do it. So instead he directed Conquest, and he ends up directing Battle for the Planet of the Apes too. Paul Dean did the script, and he also did the script for Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape for the Planet of the Apes, and this one, Conquest. He didn't do the first one or the last one, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. In the previous movie, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, chimpanzees Cornelius, his wife Zara, and their friend Dr. Milo travel from the future to 1973 Southern California. Spoilers, it doesn't go well for them, and they all end up getting killed, except for their newborn son, Milo, who survives. He then spends the next 18 years living with circus owner Armando, although in 1973 the apes were mostly treated nicely. By 1991, apes are now slaves. As it turns out, an astronaut bought a virus from outer space, and by 1983, all of the cats and dogs had been wiped out. People replaced apes as their pets and then realized that apes could be used for something much better, slave labor. One thing that always gets me about this movie is in 1973, apes from the future come down, they're public darlings, they're on television, they end up getting killed. But before they get killed, it's revealed that apes rule the planet in the future and humans are nothing more than animals. Then in the 80s, the cats and dogs get wiped out and people decide that they're going to use apes instead. But eventually, apes end up becoming nothing more than slave labor. By 91, the apes are starting to revolt, but people have this tremendous fear of the talking apes that one day the ape is going to come and start taking over. The only thing is, if you're so fearful of the apes, why breed so many apes so that there's more apes probably running around in a city than there are humans? Of course, it probably leads into the destructive nature of people, because there's a scene where a lady's talking about how she doesn't like cigarettes anymore now that she knows that they won't hurt her. So, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes has a lot of returning faces, although some of them are under masks. Roddy McDowell returns, not as Cornelius this time, but as his son Ceasar, and he's actually pretty good in it. He gets a full range of emotions, and you can really tell where Caesar's an innocent in the beginning of the movie, and then his grief when Armando gets killed, and then later on where he's this powerful, revengeful ape leader. Ricardo Montalban returns as circus owner Armando, and of course, he's fantastic. I don't think Montalban was ever not good in anything. It is ironic, though, that in this movie, the circus owner is one of the few people who is actually kind to animals, because let's be honest, circuses do not have a good reputation when it comes to animals. John Randolph returns as the chairman of the commission that was made in order to determine what to do with Cornelius and Zira. His footage actually it's archival footage in the movie, but it's actually was stuff that was filmed original for this movie. Natalie Trundy, first seen in Beneath the Planet of the Apes as the female mutant Albina, and then seen in Escape from the Planet of the Apes as Dr. Stephanie Branton, is Lisa in this one. Last seen as Lucius in Planet of the Apes, Lou Wagner returns as the busboy, and also from Planet of the Apes, Buck Cartalian, who was Julius, is Frank. New faces are, as one of the good guys is Harry Rhodes as McDonald. Harry Rhodes, I think, is fantastic as McDonald. His character is unique, I think, in movies where very rarely is one character the voice of reason for both the good guy and the voice of reason for the bad guy. Of course, technically, neither one ever really listens to him, sort of. Severin Darden is Culp. He's the chief of the secret police, and it's because of his actions that we end up with the Planet of the Apes. He inadvertently causes the death of Armando, and then he personally orders the execution of Caesar, but because of interference with McDonald, which allows Caesar to escape, and Caesar causes a revolt, so technically Culp is the reason for the Planet of the Apes. Although you only see him from the side and from a distance, you might recognize the voice of Gordon Jump as the auctioneer at the auction where Ceasar sold to Governor Beck. He would later become famous as Arthur Carlson in WKRP in Cincinnati. The budget for Conquest of the Planet of the Apes was $1.7 million, which is about $12.9 million in today's dollars. Now, keep in mind, the original Planet of the Apes was $5.8 million in 1967, so this was considerably cheaper. One of the ways that they saved a lot of money was they were able to borrow computer equipment and all of the apes jumpsuits from Irwin Allen. They were used in Voyage to the Planet of the Apes, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and Time Tunnel. Conquest made $9.7 million at the box office, which would be $73.7 million in today's money. So it did actually do quite well. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is very much a movie of the time. All of the riots you see in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes are inspired and based on riots that were happening in LA in the late 60s, early 70s. The movie is very brutal. The original cut of the movie was even more brutal than what was actually released. But when they did the test screenings, people were complaining that it was too brutal. And then they realized, oh, that's right, Planet of the Apes movies are family movies. So they edited it down. It's still brutal. And the fact, when people talk about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, that's one thing that they talk about. It's either, reception seems to be 50-50. You either like it because of the brutality of the riots, or you think the riots are just too brutal and just pointless. Conquest is set in 1991, and the movie came out in 1972. So one of the ways to make it future and to show how it's futuristic is, well, we all know how crazy the color scheme was in the 70s. So the people of the 90s wear all black, very muted colors, mostly blacks and grays. I do believe that even in the 70s, it was a faux pas to wear white socks with black shoes. So this is showing that in the future. And in the future, the phones don't have cords. Because they just taped over the cord socket and just took the cord out. There are two scenes that I personally like in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. The first one is when Ceasar is brought into ape management at first. He's fingerprinted, and it's kind of quiet. And then the camera pans up, and it shows the main ape management room, and it's just complete chaos, just a controlled chaos and a very scary place. The second thing that I really like is at the end. Doesn't matter which version that you see, but it's when Ceasar is giving his speech and he's just looking over his rights and over the other apes, and it's playing the music from the first Planet of the Apes, and it's got gives it a very eerie tone to it. In the 70s, coloring books and activity books were made about the Planet of the Apes. This one features scenes from Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, but all of the artwork is more along based on the earlier movies and not Conquest. In the 70s, Power Records made Planet of the Apes children's records that were adaptations of the stories, and they came with a comic book and a 45 record. They released them in different combinations, singly and as a compilation. Strangely, they did not do Conquest, but they did do the other four Planet of the Apes movies. There is a novelization of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I think it's weird that it doesn't show Ceasar or Armando or Beck. Instead, it has Lisa on the cover. The Planet of the Apes magazine told the story of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes in a black and white comic book form, beginning with issue 17 and ending in issue 21. Unlike the first three Planet of the Apes movies, Conquest does not begin with a pre-title sequence. The action takes place during the titles. However, in the novelization and in the comic novelization, there's a scene where an ape is captured by the authorities and he's all beat up. This was apparently filmed, but it wasn't used, and apparently that footage is lost. Also, the ape that Ceasar sees in the beginning, that's why he screams out. In the credits, his name is Aldo. It's not mentioned on screen. Aldo, if you remember, was the one that Cornelius had said in the previous movie that starts the revolution. This was supposed to show that by the Cornelius and Zira arriving in the past in the previous movie and Ceasar being there now, things have changed. Well, that's Escape from the Planet of the Apes. I hope you liked this video as much as I liked making it. I hope you check out my other Planet of the Apes videos and my other Let's Talk About. Put in the comments what you think of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and take care.
Ape management is in the hands of the apes.